Hi, now I'm going to start talking to you about pastel. Pastel is one of my favorite media. When I transitioned from drawing and I wanted to work with color and I was a little nervous, I found pastel to be friendly in transition. I love the way it feels. For me, I love the way it feels. Some people don't love the way it feels. But anyway, I'm real excited about talking to you about it. In this class, I will be suggesting the use of a certain type of foundation. Though with pastel, you can use innumerable foundations. You can actually use watercolor paper. You can use rough, smooth, like a cold press, hot press. Hot press is smooth, watercolor paper. Cold press is not quite as smooth, and rough is rough. And you can use that, and you can use different poundages, everything from 300 pound to 90 pound if you want. So you can use watercolor paper, and you can actually paint underneath with watercolor, and then build your pastels on top. But I'm not going to be dealing with that in this upcoming class, though in another pastel class I will. One of the things, though, also that you can use besides watercolor paper is you can use pastel paper by like a company like Canson, and they have wonderful colors in their paper. You can get all different colors, which so you begin with a different color under your painting. Some of the paint have a tooth, a rough side or a smooth side, a grain side. There are different textures that you can get with your paper. I have a friend who works on, actually loves to work on Bristol paper, which is typically not used with pastel because it's smooth, but he loves the way it responds, the way he works. But for this class, I'm going to suggest Canson paper. Now there's also sanded paper that you can use. That is, it's sort of a stiff and it has like a sand grain on it. Some people like to use that. I personally find that it uses up a lot of pastel when you're working with a sanded paper. I don't recommend it for this class, but if you want to use it, you're free to do so. That's one of the things that I'll be talking to you about. There's also, you can make your own paper or work on a board and make your own pastel paper, but it's kind of tricky because there's mediums that you can get that you can spray on or scrub on, but it's hard to get the surface perfectly even when you do it by yourself. But if you don't like it perfectly even, that's a great way to create some textural effects with your pastel, using the pumice that comes in the acrylic base that mix together. But we're not going to be dealing with that in this class. I'm going to recommend just the Canson paper, and you can get a pad of it or a large sheets. But I remember for this class, I'm going to recommend 11 by 14 is the largest, or 12 by 12 is the largest, going down to the smallest, no smaller. I don't want to have a 6 by 8. You could use a 6 by 6. You could use, you can't use 6 by 6, I'm sorry. You can use an 8 by 10, 9 by 12, 10 by 10. But the largest would be 11 by 14 or 12 by 12, and the smallest is 6 by 8. So anyway, that's about the, and there's innumerable companies. There's Strathmore has watercolor paper, LeCarte, Archival Matte Board, Art Spectrum. There's innumerable companies, and you will see in the handout I listed all the companies. And really, as long as it's a paper, I'm fine with it. So just to let you know that that's what I'm looking for the class. And so that is with the paper. Foundations, they're called. That's the foundation. The next thing I want to talk to you about is the actual pastels. They come in three basic categorizations. hard, medium, and soft. And when you work in pastel, you generally lay down the hard pastel first, and then you build with medium and soft pastels. The problem is that sometimes companies are not uniform in their description of what they would term, we have a soft pastel. Like, for example, Rembrandt may say they have a soft pastel, and it's really more of a medium pastel, whereas some of the Unison and some of the other companies have a true soft pastel, or even Schminke, or has a soft pastel. And in the sheet that I am handing out to you, you will see them categorized, and I'll explain that in further detail. A hard pastel, which is pretty, really, truly hard, is a company called New Pastel, and they come in very skinny little sticks, and I will show you a picture of the skinny little stick, as opposed to something like this, which is not a skinny stick. Now, there's a rolled pastel. Let me show you, let's see here, I'm going to do another blue. This is hand rolled. These tend to be very soft, whereas these sticks are extruded by a machine. And so they tend to be harder. There's Yarka. Yarka is a fairly hard pastel. It's actually made in Russia. You'll also find that American companies tend to produce pastels that are brighter and more, they have more luminescent, very bright colors, whereas the European colors, like there's a company, Unison, in northern Scotland that produces the pastels that are hand rolled, and their colors are more northern. They don't have as bright color range as the American colors, as the same with the Russian colors from Yarka. They tend to have not as brilliant colors. They're more earthy in tone. So depending on how you like to work, you will want maybe to have selections of going toward, if you're first starting out, to go with a company that is more in like what you would like. I recommend actually for us Americans to start with an American company like the New Pastels. And I also recommend maybe some of the French, like the Schminke, or even a Rembrandt, which is more of a medium, a pastel. But you can make beautiful pastels just with a good set of New Pastels. Now, in my oil painting and my acrylic class, I talked about having two of each color, a warm and a cool of red, a warm and a cool of yellow, and a warm and a cool of blue. And that process in principle works similarly with pastels, but not exactly. You're going to want to have a range of colors, and you actually mix your colors in pastel by putting them next to each other and overlaying them. So it's a little different process than with oil paint or acrylic paint. But it is good to have a range of blues, like a warmish blues, coolish blues, warmish greens. And as you see in the chart here, I kind of named the colors, and I'll post the chart up, and you'll see how you can have a warmish yellow that tends more towards red, and a coolish yellow that tends more towards green. And you'll see that in the chart, like the red there's a cool red that tends towards blue. And so when you select your pastel color set, make sure that you have not just one red, but you have a some reds that tend to be warmish, and some red that tends to be cool. And that will help with mixing the colors and getting them to have the variety that you would like. The other thing is, when I first started with collecting pastels, I didn't have, you know, just getting the pastels was excited, but I needed to sort them, because you can't just throw them all together, because then you can't find what you need. So I ended up initially with a fishing tackle box. They had 4 trays like this, and so I made a blue tray, a yellow tray, I think I had a blue tray, a yellow tray, a red tray, and a green tray. And then when I had reds, I had the browns with them. So I had them kind of sorted together according to color, and going from light to dark, or from purple to blue, to like a middle blue, to a greenish blue. And I organized them that way. But then when I decided I wanted to take my pastels and have them be more portable, I bought a little box like this, and they all came, I put them all in all the yellows together, and they weren't as well organized, but I didn't have as many in that set, but they were together, all the yellows, and like all the greens were together in a set here. All the greens were together. And I had a foam, piece of foam on the bottom to kind of keep them clean. But you know, the best way to keep all your pastels pretty clean is you either put them while you're working in cornmeal, and the cornmeal will, you can't obviously use this cornmeal after you put the pastels in there, but they will clean off the other colors from them, and your pastels will stay relatively clean, so you can tell what they are. The other thing besides cornmeal, which this is ground cornmeal, you can also use rice. I've used whole rice, and I've also ground my rice and put the pastels in there, and it kind of cleans off the outer surface of the pastel so that you can see them. And so the ones that I'm working with at the time, I keep in together, and they may be all different colors, but those are the ones that I would be choosing to be working with while I'm working on my painting that I'm making. The other thing is, I really recommend is using plastic gloves, because you're unlike with the paint, you're not in direct contact with the different pigments, and some of the pigments they may or may not be safe to ingest in your body, for sure, to eat, but even to pass through into your skin. So I really recommend using plastic gloves. The other thing with pastel is that when you apply the pastel, you can use different tools to brush with them. This is a fan brush. I love using that with my pastels. And the other thing I like to use, it's sort of a rubber thing. I think you use it in painting too. I've not used it for painting, but I have used it quite a bit. It's like a piece of rubber, and you can get a really sharp edge, and you can rub it. It really gives us a nice, and other brushes. I've just set aside those brushes, and you can see they have a little bit of dust for them. You really only need the hard pastels to start out with as your foundation. You could use a medium like a Rembrandt. That would work fine. Some people like to use pastel pencils, which are basically pencils with pastel inside of them. The tricky thing, to just warn you, if you buy them, don't drop them on the ground, because they tend to break into little chunks, and then you're basically you've got a broken pastel sticking inside your stick. But they're nice for doing very fine lines. But I will say to you that you can use the edges of these to draw nice fine lines. The other piece, and I didn't bring it here, is a small piece of sandpaper that you can use to sharpen the edges of your pastel, especially the hard pastel, if you want to have a fine edge for your pastel. It's a really a simple tool. Now, I showed you my fishing tackle box for storage. That was the first set for my pastels. And then I wanted a portable one, but I really, I wanted to go out and paint outside with my pastels. And, excuse me, I just dropped a piece. So I found this beautiful set, and I don't know if you can see it, but I will take it apart here. Can you, maybe I can get my business partner here to help me. I will show you. This is how this wonderful box, it was all covered up, so they stay nice and tidy, and they lock up. It's really nice. All of this stays in place. Keep it nice and flat. Close it up, and this has, I think, just like a cloth to wipe your hands with. You can put your various brushes in there that you use for cleaning. You could put your enclosed container of cornmeal or whatever in there. So anyway, it's just a really handy container, and then you take it and you put it, I think I'm going to have to do it this way. Anyway, you set this up like this. I'll get this, normally I level it out. And then you put your canvas, you would have a piece of a board, and you would tape it up here. I would have a board on here of some kind. I could use a board like this, and I could attach it to, this isn't quite the same type board, but I'd attach it up here. The board would be the same side, and then I would work, and the nice thing is that the pastel will fall into this little tray at the bottom, and while you're working. And so you're not going to have too much loose pastel here. And I have done this, is where I take, when I'm done working at the end of the day, I'll take the pastel that fell into this tray, and I'll save it, and I'll mix it with a little bit of water, roll it, and I'll get some earth colors that I can actually use to paint with. So I don't waste the pastel. And that's kind of cool. But the nice thing about this is, let me see if I can put this back here. Is the nice thing is you can put these back, and they're all in one place, very tidy. Put everything back. Close it up. And there it is, all in one place. It's kind of nice. But you don't need this. This is just like, oh, heaven. So, but I've started out with a fishing tackle box. I've used little trays like this over the years, and all of that works just super with pastel. But now one more thing you need always when you're working is you need paper towels. And one of the things I like to use when I lay down the initial colors is I like to use a workable fixative. It's sort of it sort of fixes the pastel on the surface. And Krylon has a great workable fixative. It's acid-free and archival safe, and basically it will let you to continue working on your pastel. But one of the things it does is, because of the refractory nature of pastel, there's like pigments, when you put them on, they like glow. And sometimes when you use the workable fixative, it will dull some of that. So I like to use it at the beginning stages when I maybe am laying in some dark colors and I want it to get a little darker. But as I finish the painting, I use this less. I don't use this less. I may sometimes put what's called a matte finish on, but at the end of my painting to eliminate, you know, to sort of fix it. But the problem with that is that it will reduce the luminosity and the brilliance of the color. Now let me tell you something, an experience I had when I was in Washington, D.C. at the National Gallery. I went into the National Gallery to go and see some paintings by Degas. Degas is a famous artist, and he worked in pastel. And unfortunately, the gallery with his work was not open. So what I did is I was moping and walking around, and one of the guards said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Well, I came all the way from, you know, the Midwest to see the Degas work, and I can't get in." He said, "Well, why don't you go up to the library upstairs and tell them that you'd like to see some Degas pieces?" So oh, okay, I thought that would be kind of fun. So I went upstairs into and I said, the gentleman, the guard told me that I could come up here and request to see some of the Degas pieces. And he says, "Sure, no problem." So they bring out this box. It's about, 24 inches by 18 or something like that. And it's about 4 inches thick, and they brought out a couple of them. And they sent me in this room, and they said, okay, and they opened up the box, and they said, "Okay, go look through this." And I got to look at these pastels by Degas that were like, let's say he lived in the 1800s, they were almost 100 years old. And you know the remarkable thing about the pastels, they looked like they were painted yesterday. The beauty about pastels is they hold their color and they just glow. It's not like they yellow or anything like the oil paintings tend to yellow when you put Damar varnish, but the pastels were amazing. And the fact that they let me touch them with my hands, no gloves or anything, was just amazing to me. I mean, I'm like thinking, what is going on here? But it was just thrilling to see how the vibrancy of the colors in these pastels. So yes, I love pastel. I just love it. You can tell. I just really love it. And I hope you love it too. And when we do this together, you can enter into the excitement of the colors and how vibrant they can be, and the kind of moods you can create and everything with pastel. So I may have forgotten some things. I did talk about these rubbing things, and if I remember, just read my notes if I remember something else, and I'll bring it up in class. But I think this gives you a good idea, and please leave comments below. If you have any questions, you can also email me or leave them in the comments, and I will check them out. And I'm real excited about working in this media with you, and I hope you enjoy it as well. And looking forward to talking to you again, and talking to you and sharing how the process, we're going to make 2 paintings in a weekend. And so that's going to be pretty exciting. So take care and have a great day.